Voters say the migrant crisis is among the most important issue in America. The millions of migrants who have crossed illegally is coming at an enormous cost to hardworking American taxpayers. And joining us right now to break down the numbers is founder and CEO of OpenTheBooks.com, Adam Andrzejewski. Good morning to you, sir. There were 2.5 million encounters, more than that, at the border in 2023. Break down the numbers for us.
Well, Jan, it was a record year on migrants with encounters at the border crossings at 2.5 million. And if you break down those numbers, there's only 400,000 that come from other countries outside of those from South America, Central America, and the Caribbean. So the number one country of origin for these encounters was Mexico, with nearly 1 out of 3 of the encounters from folks with an origin from Mexico. But then you have a myriad of South and Central and Caribbean countries. 1.4 million encounters came from countries, for instance, like Venezuela, Guatemala, Honduras, Colombia, and Cuba.
What has been the response from the federal government over the past 2 years? Break down the taxpayer-provided benefits that these migrants receive.
Well, the federal government agencies have, quite frankly, been absolutely overwhelmed. So you have, for instance, the Office of Refugee Resettlement. And just in the last 2 years, taxpayers have put $20 billion into that office. And last year, in 2023, the funding was up $2 billion in 1 year to deal with the crush of migrants at the border crossings. And so here's a list of the public benefits that you receive coming out of that office. So, for example, you get emergency housing support, you get a work authorization, you get public benefits application, you get a medical exam, school enrollment, cultural orientation, mental health services, and legal services. So the benefits are very lucrative.
Yeah, it goes on and on. Now, the director of the federal agency from the Office of Refugee Resettlement, you say, has a conflict of interest. How significant is her conflict?
Well, Jan, we're always worried about agency capture from outside third-party organizations who want to make sure that their federal funding streams from taxpayers remain consistent. And so Robin Dunn-Marco, she heads up the Office of Refugee Resettlement, and she comes out of the industry for 27 years from 2 of the top organizations that receive the most hundreds of millions of dollars every single year in federal grants. And one of them is the International Rescue Committee, where she spent 23 years in an executive capacity. And just last year, her first full year on the job as director, their funding increased from $138 million in grants from her agency up to $235 million in 1 year, an increase of nearly $100 million. Now, we reached out to her and to the agency for comment, and they said, yes, it's a conflict of interest. For 2 years, she's recused from any decisions with that entity, but that recusal ends this September 11th of this year. And so we're calling on Congress to hold hearings to actually make sure that the agency hasn't been captured by her former employers.
Speaking of hearings, meantime, there's been plenty of those congressional hearings and investigations over the number of children who have crossed the border and then just disappeared from the system. What are those numbers, and how significant is the threat to these kids?
Well, this is a human health catastrophe. You have the unintended consequences in the last 2 years alone of 260,000 unaccompanied minors at the border crossings. These are kids under 18 years of age that don't come across with a parent or a guardian. And that's equivalent to the population of Anchorage, Alaska. And 85,000, according to the New York Times, of those unaccompanied minors have been lost in the system, that they don't return phone calls from the agency. And so Robin Dunn-Marco's, she's in charge of this. She was in front of Congress last April, and she refused to question whether the sponsor vetting system was broken. She refused to confirm the 85,000 lost children in the system, according to the New York Times. And so, look, we have a lack of answers. We've got tens of billions of dollars flowing. We've got conflicts of interest, and Congress, again, needs to start digging in here.
Founder and CEO of OpenTheBooks.com, Adam Andrzejewski, thanks for joining us.